Okay, sir, you can just welcome everybody and then we can go ahead with the proceedings, sir.
Okay. Okay. Good evening, all the members. It is a very happy occasion that we are having the second session. And we have got a most eminent member of ours who has got elevated and his vision, his exposure has gone up sky high. And we welcome Mr. Amar Patnaik. Thank you very much for agreeing to come and give us a talk on the subject which not many of us are very familiar with. And welcome all the members of Think Tank and anybody else who is participating. With this, we request Mr. Amar Patnaik to kindly go ahead.
I will introduce Mr. Patnaik, sir. I will introduce the chief.
Please, okay, please go ahead and let us hear him and whatever questions, etc. are there, and let us have sufficient time to clarify our mind. This is a new subject for most of us. Thank you very much. Over to Mr. Swadesh Patnaik.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. It's really a great privilege on my part to introduce our chief speaker of this evening, Dr. Amar Patnaik, Honorable Member of Parliament of Upper House. I would rather call him simply Amar Patnaik or Amar, as I know him when he was very young. His father was my senior colleague. Mr. Patnaik had a very brilliant academic career. He was one of the brightest students of DM School, Bhubaneswar, like Sasikanta Das, and he graduated from St. Stephen's College, New Delhi. He further pursued a master's degree in public management from the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, Singapore, and John F. Kennedy School of Government of Harvard University. In the year 1990, he was selected to INAS. While in service, he got scholarship for excellence at London School of Economics by the Foreign and Commonwealth Office of the British Commonwealth in 2013. In 2015, he completed an advanced management development program from the Wharton School of University of Pennsylvania. He had also did his MBA from Xavier's Institute of Management and obtained PhD from Xavier's University. His thesis was published by Palgrave Macmillan titled Institutional Change and the Power of Asymmetries in the Context of Rural India in 2016. In his service career, Dr. Patnaik was known for his high level of professional competence, honesty, integrity, and no-nonsense attitude. He had a great role in unearthing some of the mega scams like fodder scam of Bihar and the LC scam of Assam. He conducted international audits of Food and Agriculture Organization (FAO) of the United Nations in Rome and Kabul, Afghanistan, and the United Nations peacekeeping operations in Sudan. He also completed a performance audit of the UN's spending on information on communication technology services across peacekeeping operations around the globe in October and November 2014. In INAS, Dr. Patnaik served as the Principal Accountant General of Odisha, West Bengal, and Kerala. 9 years before his retirement, Dr. Patnaik took voluntary retirement and joined Biju Janata Dal on 29 August 2018, and he became member of Parliament Rajya Sabha on 28 June 2019. Presently, he is appointed as a member of the various parliamentary committees, such as Standing Committee on Finance, Joint Parliamentary Committee on Personal Data Protection Bill, Committee on Subordinate Legislation, Rajya Sabha, and an ad hoc member of a committee of the Rajya Sabha to study the alarming issue of pornography and the social media and its effect on children and society as a whole. The list is really going on, but I should stop here. And with this brief introduction, I welcome Dr. Patnaik to this 54th meeting of the think tank to share his thoughts. Thank you very much. Thank you and welcome, Dr. Patnaik.
Thank you so much, everybody here. I am honored and humbled by this invitation. I'm thankful to Swadesh Babu for the very, very generous words. Actually, this is there already in the Wikipedia, I think. And wherever I go, they copy from the Wikipedia and say these things, which is quite long, actually. So my role as a parliamentarian in the last 1 year that I have been an MP. I also took out what I have done as my first year as a member of parliament in the form of a book which had linkages to everything that I did, which is posted on the Twitter handle and the Facebook account every day on a daily basis. My role, which I performed during the time of the lockdown and subsequent to that in the reverse migration, is all captured there, and this was circulated. I did it completely online, and also sent the material, hosted it on my website. I would be grateful if I could also send a copy of it in the WhatsApp group of the think tank. I'd be grateful if some of you could find time to go through it and give me suggestions so that I could improve the content as well as the get up and the the subjects that I could take forward in the subsequent years as a member of parliament. I know this topic which I chose to speak on is relatively, I would rather say, um, is not being discussed. Unfortunately, I must say, in our state. My whatever little experience says that this legislation, I am a member of the Joint Parliamentary Committee, as Suresh Babu just said. I am a member of the Joint Parliamentary Committee on Personal Data Protection Bill, about which I am going to talk today. So my experience says that I may not have been born before 1947 to make this claim, but whatever I have as a student of history and as a student of being a bureaucrat and having read lots of stuff, that this piece of legislation you would see would become one of the most important legislation of independent India. If you do a personal data protection bill, Google, you will find that countries have struggled for years together to arrive at a bill or to dish out a bill to its citizens. In fact, currently, the data protection bill which gets referred to by everybody in the world is the European Union's EU GDPR, European Union's General Data Protection Bill. And EU GDPR is the benchmark against which other countries have made their personal data protection bills. I do not know if you would recollect the kind of conversation or kind of critics that people came out with in reaction to the Aarogya Setu. People said that, why should you have our information? We do not know whether that information will be taken by the government for surveillance purpose. We do not know whether that information will be used by somebody else for other purpose. We have heard about Cambridge Analytica, that it took information from social media. Facebook sold this information so that the political parties, and who in turn sold political parties for getting a stranglehold over the elections. You have heard about the conversation that is happening about the American elections between Trump's supporters and his critics as regards Russia's interference in the democratic process. So this bill actually is one of the most significant bills that is going to affect the life of each and every citizen of this country. And it is rather unfortunate, I must say, and this is a kind of takeaway from the conversation between in the interaction between me and all of you, that when there is something such significant thing which is happening in the country, why should it be limited to a few group of people in Delhi who are either supporting the bill or are against the bill? It is also not sufficient that only 30 members of the parliament should be dealing with this bill and the rest are completely unaware until it is placed in the Lok Sabha and the Rajya Sabha and discussed. And you know the kind of discussion that happens in Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha over a period of, let us say, 4 hours, 5 hours, or 6 hours may not be doing justice to this bill, because it is, as I said, going to affect each and every aspect of Indian citizen for all times to come. It is going to be a mother of all bills, whether it is the IRDA bill, whether it will be the Consumer Protection Bill, whether it is the Competition Commission, whether it is going to be the RBI, everybody will be covered under this bill. So you can imagine the significance of this bill. And what is this bill about? It basically talks about personal data protection. And why this subject has come up? This subject has come up because of the Puttaswamy, there's a person, the person who filed the case, K. Puttaswamy judgment of the Supreme Court on 24th August 2017, when somebody said that I have a right to privacy, in the sense I will not, if I choose not to divulge my date of birth, if I choose not to tell my name, if I choose to not to say what I eat, if I choose not to say what I wear, if I choose not to say what is my village name, then I should be allowed to do that, and I should be protected by law to do that. So the the entire origin of the privacy debate in India, actually the privacy debate in India has been there from before, and if you do a historical analysis of the way the privacy debate has flown in the Supreme Court itself, that from a position of citizens having no right to privacy, that is the center being the big father or the big brother or pater familias, he knows everything. The government of the day knows everything what the citizens want and will do everything for their good, whether they like it or not. To a position in 2017, as I said, of the Puttaswamy case versus Union of India, where the judgment for the first time recognized that privacy is a fundamental right. It is as fundamental as right to life, and under Article 19(2), that freedom to decide the choice of whether to divulge your information or not to divulge the information. I'm using very simplistic language. The information itself has been categorized in the bill in a number of ways. I don't want to make it complicated because I want to give the spirit of the act across to all of you. Then we can have a question answer. Depending on the questions, I'll probably get deeper into the bill. So the right to privacy being a fundamental right originated in the case Puttaswamy, Union of India judgment. It was a 9-judge bench, and it was for the first time recognized that informational privacy in the digital world is an integral component of right to privacy under the Constitution. First, they said in 2017 judgment, it said, and you must also remember that simultaneously the Aadhaar issue had come up before the Supreme Court, where the use of the Aadhaar data for various purposes, including giving benefits, the various benefits to the citizens, was also questioned by certain people. By saying that the Aadhaar data of theirs was being used to cause harm to them. So all these issues were coming up in the narrative was being created around the issue of privacy and data protection. And then the Supreme Court came in 2017 with this judgment, and it said that the right to privacy under the Constitution is a fundamental right, but there will of course be, it is not unbridled. There can be reasonable restrictions. But what are those reasonable restrictions? Just as in case of fundamental rights, any fundamental right, these reasonable restrictions have to be specified in a law. It has to be reasonable. It has to be having a clear nexus with the purpose that it seeks to achieve. The overall thing that I can say is that the state's right to take away citizens' private information was curtailed, unless there are various conditions which have been laid down by the Supreme Court. This is a momentous decision in terms of citizens' rights in this country, and that is why I say that every aspect of our life, social media, what we are talking in Zoom here, what we are doing, everything will be covered by this. If you have gone to a mall and you've given some data relating to your purchase, they cannot sell it or they can't share it without taking your consent. So what happened is that no data can be shared of a citizen without seeking his consent. That became the broad principle. There could be exceptions. I'll come to all that. And those exceptions were laid down. So this bill essentially says these things. Of course, it gives much more details. I'll talk about it a little bit. And then it gives the exceptions when the state or the government can violate it. Now, this is another thing I must say also, that there was an IT Act before that. The IT Act, Information Technology Act, that was also there since 2000, but it was applicable only to body corporates. But here, the PDP has become an all-encompassing act in which it is applied to everybody. You can't share my information, I can't share your information. The mall cannot share my information without taking my consent. I can't share the mall's information without taking it. It's there everywhere. So in this kind of a situation, the citizen who has the data about himself, he is called the data principal. And the person who is taking the data of the citizen, for let us say it is generated, you are buying something, you are, the passport officer has some information, the Aadhaar has some information, authority, unique identification authority, all the police station has some information, motor vehicle department has some information. All this information will now be given away only after seeking your consent from the person whose data it is there. And all these authorities will be governed by this. They are called as the data fiduciaries. In the act, they're called as the data fiduciaries. So just like, you know, in a trust kind of a thing, you know, if you know about the Indian Trust Act, they use the term fiduciary. And so the relationship between the citizen and the person who has his data is that of trust. And in order to ensure that he is sharing the data with the data fiduciary, because he trusts that his data will not be misused or will not be used to cause harm to him. And how do you ensure that that trust is established or is respected, and it is ensured that the trust is maintained between both the parties? Therefore, there has to be a legislation. And if there is a breach, then everybody should be penalized. And that is how the Personal Data Protection Bill is poised at the moment. And the breaches, unlike any other law so far that is known to me, in this particular law, the proposal, currently the bill is under discussion in the JPC with various, it's an intense debate which is going on, because as I said, it is going to change the life of every citizen in this country. So for the first time, you will have government officials responsible for data breaches being penalized, including criminal prosecution. And penalties have been very, very huge. And there's an independent data protection authority, which is almost like, you know, it is lording over every other organization that is really keeping the data. Because you see, data has become our life. Data is the new oil. Everything that you do, the moment I'm talking to you, data is also being generated. A photograph you take is also data. What is data? Excuse me. Data has been defined as anything, the retinal data, the biometrics, the name, everything in which you can take the data to identify with a person. That's called personal data. Any set of information by which you can identify the person with that data, then it is called personal data. And such personal data cannot be revealed without taking consent of the person whose data it is. That is the broad principle. And there are exceptions, of course, I'll come to that. Then in 2018, so this was the first thing. In 2017, August, it became the informational privacy, became a part, when it was announced, the Supreme Court said in a 9-judge bench, which is significant, said that it is so this is going to the law of the land now. The right to privacy is a part of fundamental rights, part 3 of the Constitution. Then came the 2018 judgment, again same Puttaswamy. The constitutionality of the Aadhaar Act was decided, and in it the Supreme Court went a step further and said that data protection is an extension of this informational privacy. So if you want to honor the right to privacy, then you have to protect the data of the citizens. And then it's articulated certain principles of data protection. And those principles now have formed the basis of the new act. And mine, and let me also tell you that these principles, Supreme Court has done a tremendous job by drawing these principles from the best that is available in the world. And of course, it has relied heavily on the EU GDPR, that is the European Union General Data Protection Bill. So what are the basic features of personal data protection? Reasonable processing of data, purpose limitation. The person whose data you are taking, you have to tell him for what purpose you are taking that data. And if you want to ask him his name, you cannot ask for again his age as an additional item. Nowadays, what do you do, or what we have grown with? If you are devising a questionnaire, if you are devising a form, collect as much data as possible, because you don't value data. Now, what does the bill does is that it enjoins upon the person who is collecting the data, whoever it is, whether it is the government, whether it is a social media platform, whether it is a private company, whether it is a motor vehicle owner, whoever it is, whether it is a transporter who is transporting your goods, it will only collect that much of data which is required for serving that purpose for which it is being collected. And that has to be mentioned upfront to the person before he agrees to give that data. If he says, no, I will not give, that right is still there with him. He might choose not to give it to him. So consent of the data principle is a must, because it is his privacy. And it is his fundamental right, whether he wants to give it up. So there is called purpose limitation. So the purpose has to be limited. If the purpose can be served, if let us say my luggage is going from here to Delhi, if the purpose is served only by collecting my name and address and the PIN code, there is no point collecting my age, my designation, my whatever else. So that's purpose limitation. Then there is a collection limitation. Collection limitation means the amount, the data which is being collected, whether that collection, the collecting mechanism or the collecting the purpose for which the data is, the purpose limitation is one, the collecting mechanism per se will be able to ensure that the data is protected. It is not going, there will not be a breach of the data. The third one is lawful processing. So it is not just adequate that your data is collected, but then you can process it in any manner. The processing of data should have been prescribed in law. You cannot do processing of data for unlawful purposes. Now, when I say unlawful purposes, it does not mean unlawful as in unlawful activities, but anything for which a law is not there, a stated objective is not there, you cannot take the data. For example, if there is no stated law in the land which says that you'll collect your data and use it for election purposes, it cannot be done. Then the fourth point is storage limitation. Now you get data and keep it for as long as you want, typical of government. Now the Supreme Court says that there is a storage limitation, and we in the act, it is in the bill, what it has been proposed is something called as right to be forgotten. I can choose that my data will be there only for till, if my luggage has reached Delhi from Bhubaneswar and I am satisfied, then I tell the person that delete my data from your database or return my data. So that's called storage limitation. And storage limitation has also been taken to great proportions by saying that critical personal data, something which is very personal to you, it cannot be stored outside India. Sensitive personal data is something like banking information. We give information which is processed outside the country, but then they have to keep a copy of it in India, and within 24 hours the processing should be over. All this has been, then there is also data quality, accountability. That is, if there is a failure, data breach and harm, there should be a fixed responsibility on the person who is responsible for this data breach, and action should be taken. So for the first time in so many years after independence, and it is a great, it is not an easy thing, as I do not know what I said, that the European Personal Data Protection Bill came into being only in 2018. So we in India are actually one of the first countries. We are not really left behind in this concept. But since a huge amount of data in this digital age, and India is also growing digitally, is being generated. Social media platforms have come in very, very large presence, have come to occupy a large presence. But there are questions of social media data being sold to different countries, to different companies for different purposes. I gave you those examples. So there was a need to recognize that data of an individual is important and is personal to him. And Supreme Court said that thing. Then while doing so, it said that there should be a committee, and the committee will draft a bill for the citizens of this country. And this was given, the task was given to Justice Sri Krishna, B.N. Sri Krishna, who drafted a bill. And based on that draft, the government of India has drafted a bill, which is now before us. I'm in the, us in the sense I'm a member of that committee which is discussing this bill. Well, cutting across party lines, the discussions are extremely intense, and because as you can see that it affects every aspect of life. And the relationship between the individual and the entities would now be completely changed. Now let me tell you, some of you may have questions, what is happening in the United States? In the United States, very strangely, there is no personal data protection bill. There is no privacy laws, an overarching privacy law. There are sectoral privacy laws. For the medical profession, there is a separate data protection law. For the trade and commerce, there is a separate data protection law. For competition, let us say, purpose, there is a separate data protection law. Now, what we have followed in India, we could have followed that model. We have each of these regulators there. But now we have set up a data protection authority, which is very powerful, which will be actually working with these regulators to sort out if there are any difficulties. But finally, as far as data's privacy is concerned, or ensuring that the citizens' data is kept private and not taken away without his consent, it will remain with the Data Protection Authority. And this, as you can see, is our debate outside as well as inside the Parliament, JPC, because this is what is going to probably create the problem. In the sense, there are so many regulators, independent regulators, who have been doing this. Let's say the RBI, the banks have information. RBI is the regulator. Now we treat RBI and the banks as data fiduciaries, and therefore we decide, the Data Protection Authority decides whether in any case they are sharing some data or processing some data without the knowledge or without the consent of the person who was given these accounts or given his account number or whatever. So the conflict between the various regulators and this overarching Data Protection Authority is going to be a sore point. This is being debated. I do not know how it will come out ultimately, but that's the point. The United States has not got into that position because it has chosen to have separate sectoral regulators, much stronger. Now, I will just, since there is not much time, I'll just speak on the critical things about the bill in terms of what are there to what are the obligations of the data fiduciary. Data fiduciary is the person who is having the data. So what are his obligations and responsibilities? What is the right of the data principal? What that is, I as a citizen, data principal, as I said, is the person who has the data. That is, it is my data. So what are my rights? Then there is what is the protection given to sensitive personal data? The personal data, there are two things here. Data has now been disaggregated into personal data, non-personal data. What is non-personal data? Non-personal data is any data which cannot be linked to an individual. In technology, it is possible to do it by removing the header and the tailor of a data packet. And they call it as what? They call it as data anonymization. You will not, but why is that required? That such kind of data is required because, let us say, if I am having the crime records of people, I should be able to use that data to better plan my law and order deployments. Otherwise, why the government is there? Why is there artificial intelligence and MCL? But what the law says, and even the EU GDPR says, is that you use metadata or anonymized data. You should not be able, you can take the data, learn, just as Dr. Saab was now talking about, you have the whole amount of data which is there of how many cases have been tested positive. I will come to many of those examples. How many has been tested positive, how much has been, what is the fatality rate and all that, to understand how the disease is behaving, what is the graph. Now that has to be done. Otherwise, how will public policy be taken? So that portion of the data has been allowed, and there is a section which says that for evidence-based policy making, the government of India has seeks an exemption, that a carve-out has been made that you can use this data without taking the consent of the individual for designing bigger public policy. There are exceptions provided. For example, if it is the question of, which is there in every act, security of the country, sovereignty of the country, public order has to be maintained, then also the exemption is there. If you want to do research, then there should be open data, open data source should be, the data should be available in the open source mode, but without divulging the details of the person or the data principle to which the data belongs. So if you want to do some modeling, that should be available. So the authority, the data protection bill allows that. If you want to do criminal investigation, that's also an exception. If you want to do journalistic reporting, that's also there, is allowed. If there are small organizations, they can't, comply with all these elaborate arrangements because there will be huge cost to them. Then there is a sandbox approach. They call it as a regulatory sandbox. So a sandbox approach allowed to them where they can do it slowly by asking people around. No cost is imposed on their transactions. So it's a piece of legislation in which the Data Protection Authority is a new authority who has been given wide powers to carry out data policy and standard setting. There are stricter penalties, very, very strict penalties and capital punishments, criminal punishments for infringement by data fiduciaries. I think it is to the extent of about 5 crores in case of significant data breaches. So it's a very, very advanced new law in consonance with international standards. And that is why I say that, except for the Data Protection Joint Parliamentary Committee, and I do not know if you do Google, you'll find I have written quite a bit on this in Times of India, I've written in Indian Express, I've written in Wire, and all over. But it is remaining confined to the upper, those people, at the upper level who are probably or upper strata of society who are bothered about this, and it is not really percolating down. Whereas it will impact even a BDO who is having a record of the people who have applied for houses under the Prime Minister's Awas Yojana, and if what does he do? Under the RTI, he has to divulge. But under this act, he should not. Now, these are questions. This is the question which I have been raising all over. What will be the interface between RTI and DPA and the Joint Data Protection Bill? Because Joint Data Protection Bill is supposed to override everything else. Because right to get data is not a fundamental right, but right to privacy is a fundamental right as given by the Supreme Court. So many such issues will arise. So I think this is one thing which I'll probably write and carry to the committee, that there is no dissemination, there is no public debate on this particular thing, which should have been happening, because it is going to affect everybody. Social media is going to affect every young citizen of this country, and there is no discussion about this. So what it does in case of social media is that it imposes a lot of restrictions on social media. So the Facebook head, the Twitter head, the Google head, all these people who appeared before us and complaining, of course, that you are really curtailing our businesses. But then that's the proposal. The proposal in the bill puts a lot of restrictions on how they can take the citizens' data and use it. Basic principle that it is a fundamental right, so you cannot use that data for any purpose without asking him. The exceptions are given in the thing. There are some debates that exceptions will be misutilized by a surveillance-loving state. So there is even a debate that if you want to tap the telephone call of somebody, there is a Telegraph Act, very old act. If you want to do anything with the citizens' data, then there should be a law for it. And people believe that since that law is not there, whatever the government is doing now, it might again get challenged in the court once this PDP bill is passed, and there will be again a Supreme Court ruling on the same. So this is broadly the principle of the Personal Data Protection Bill, but these are all on the what I spoke about the bill so far is on the aspect of safeguarding the data of the citizens of the state. But at the same time, the Act also recognizes the fact that data has to be used for digital economy, for growth, and therefore what it does that it provides exceptions in which the data, as I said, the metadata or anonymized data can be taken and used for, let us say, medical purposes, health emergency, state security, employment issues, and for research and development, artificial intelligence, all these aspects. So it has tried to do a balancing act of between privacy and on one hand and disclosure on the other hand for achieving digital growth and innovation. If data is not there, if the important technologies, innovations of because of artificial intelligence and MCL is not made use of in case of, let's say, climate prediction, weather predictions, in case of agriculture, whatever, then what is the use of this data? Data is the new oil, as they say. So what the bill does is that there are debates on this as well. I am of the firm view that data should be treated as an asset, and just as you are very careful about selling your building or your own property, you will be very careful about valuing the data, and therefore there should be a data market. I had a debate webinar day before yesterday with Justice Sri Krishna also on this aspect. So this is how it is poised. There are issues relating to the independence of the DPA, whether the centralization is going to take place, and there are several other aspects. In my limited the objective that I set for myself, I basically wanted to tell you about what is this about. So I conclude my speech by saying that this is one of the most significant legislation. So if you have any questions, please address these questions to me. Thank you.
May I ask a question?
Yeah, sure.
Firstly, it's a brilliant exposure. We are totally new to it. One has been reading here and there. But now we have got a fairly good idea that where is the conflict area, whether this and that, and rightly pointed out by you, that there has to be certain clarification, etc. My question to you is this Aadhaar and social media in particular, collecting and giving our data, selling to others. And I'm told that these data are also useful for maneuvering election and electioneering process. Could you give some, throw some light on it?
Yes, I did speak about it, that, you know, the debate on data privacy or protection of data has assumed importance all over the world simply because of the fact that there was allegation that the entire American election, Trump's re-election, was to some extent rigged because of by the Russians by using this kind of data or data transfer taking. I didn't speak about a cross-border data flow. So the Act itself talks about a very strict regime for cross-border data flow between one country to another country. Now, currently, since there is no law, all that is happening, the selling of the data, as you said, everything is probably happening. But once this Act comes into being, these will be very, very strongly regulated. But the question is, as in India, as in any other Act, the provisions would be there, the law would be there, implementation, there would be issues. So I foresee, I have been saying, and I've written about it, that you can have a very robust Act, but operationalizing the various provisions of the Act may be very difficult. Once, however, the good thing is that once this Act comes into being, there will be enabling provision to prosecute a social media intermediary who is selling the data of citizens without taking their consent. The citizens also, I'm a strong votary of the fact that if the company wants to take my data and use it for various purpose, as I said, it has to state me the purpose limitation. It has to tell me I'm a very important person, let us say Shah Rukh Khan, they want my data, then I should be able to sell it. I should have a cost to it, and therefore there should be a data market for it. So the latest report, which is about 15 days ago about non-personal data given by Krish Gopalakrishnan, shares that view, which I have said. That is, data, they are trying to have data markets for non-personal data. But the election, as you talked very rightly, you can imagine how it can influence democracy, how it can influence citizens' choice. You know, after understanding a particular group of people's buying behavior without their knowledge, targeting them or changing their behavioral pattern by selling certain kind of products. So all these was happening now without any regulation. Now with the coming out of the PDP bill or PDP Act, all these would get regulated. But the question would still remain, and I emphatically say this, that whether the operationalization of the provisions of the Act would be easy, because the Data Protection Authority has to be a superhuman being to be able to regulate all these kind of things. But I'm sure over a period of time, things would improve. The intent is there. There are adjudicators, there are specialists, there are code of practitioners, various things. But still, the overall overarching theme that is running across the country, whoever is informed, is that there are a lot of loopholes, a lot of gaps which have been left to be decided by the central government at a later date, and which is what people don't like. Because one is getting the data and using it for commercial purposes, but a bigger danger, as you said, is taking the data and using it to change the course of democracy, change the course of elections, change the course of the results of elections. That's a bigger danger. And therefore, rightly, a lot of conscientious citizens are worried about that. And therefore, that debate is raging in this country in various fora. And I'm a part of that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amar Babu. It was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much. God bless.
Thank you.
I like to ask some questions. Can I?
Yes, sure, ma'am.
You mentioned about several factors that definitely concern us. And for example, you said about storage limitation and the critical data storage. So here, actually through data analytics, we are teaching students how to bridge this and how to go for unlimited data and keep it aside in data mart, so that will be used by people, those who are in need. So here actually data security matters, and this data security, actually we are not that strong in India. Particularly, we are not very strong about data security. Unless we incorporate this particular factor, I do not know in the PDP bill whether it is there or not, to procure high-level data security package systems so that you can preserve it. Because this AI and ML technique, we are teaching people how to use that. So means how to do all those things, because companies, they are now going for shadow IT. The shadow IT means, let us say they will be having their own device and a company will be having their own device. For example, like that, this work from home. So here, security is breached of the organization also. So are we going, because we are maintaining, let us say, working for a particular organization which involves indirectly the human data. And we can go by that. We can deal with that if we breach the security. My third
question, madam. Question, madam. Question.
Yeah.
What is the question?
So I wonder, what is the step? Is it there in the PDP bill or not? And the other thing is, our data is already there in the cloud, and it is in the foreign servers. So is India going to take steps to bring back to its own servers and erase those?
Right. So let me talk. There are two questions. The second question and the first question are also linked a little bit. Let me talk about the first one. As I said, anybody who is keeping the data, as per the bill, anybody who is keeping data, whether it is an educational institution, whether it is a hospital, whether it is the railways, whether it is the state government, whether it is a trust, whether it is an educational institution, is responsible under the Act to ensure that there is no breach of the data. There is no leakage of the data which has been collected from the various people whose data it is keeping. And therefore, he is called as a data fiduciary. Almost everybody will be called a data fiduciary. And as I said, a fiduciary's responsibility is to ensure that its principal's data is based on trust. So if there is a breach which has caused harm to the data principle, then the fiduciary will be taken to task. And the task is both criminal as well as huge penalties. So automatically, the data fiduciary has to ensure that there is very high level of IT security to ensure that there is confidentiality, integrity of the data is maintained, and this is going to happen all over. Anybody who is keeping data is now bound once the act comes into being to ensure that the data is secure. So if you are using the data for research purpose, for let us say using AI techniques for modeling and other things, you have to ensure that that data is anonymized. Anonymized means that data is not, we cannot link the data to a particular person. So you have to either remove the header or the tailor from the data packet, or standards of anonymization will be prescribed later, which has to be followed to ensure that the data loses its individual characteristics. So this is going to be the new law. Now linked to this is the question of clouds. We keep a lot of data now on the cloud. Now cloud is cheaper. But what is the cloud? A cloud is not really a cloud. It is basically servers which are outside the country. So in 2018, it is not the central government, but the Reserve Bank of India, who said that payments data of every individual has to be kept, localization of data as they call. They have to be kept within servers inside the country. Because it arose from this issue that all these fugitives, all these fraudsters, all the data that the Enforcement Directorate wanted, the NIA wanted, it was not getting it because the data was being stored outside. Even though there are international bodies which, like in India, we have CERT-in, CERT-in. Similarly, there are international bodies where you can give a requisition for data, but it was taking a long time. So the Reserve Bank of India said that all this data has to be kept, has to be localized. The bill now currently says, first it says that there are three kinds of data. Non-personal data, cross-border, there is no issue. But personal data, it is classified into two. One is the critical personal data. Critical personal data, let's say retinal images, face recognition, all these kind of things which are very, very personal. They have not defined as yet, by the way. They will be defined by the Government of India later. But those have to be kept within India. It has to be stored in India. There is no way it can go. The sensitive personal data, another category which is a little less critical but more sensitive, which may be payments data, which could be your data about your bank statements and other things. There also it says that you can take it outside the country for processing purpose, but you have to keep a mirror image within the country, and so that whenever it is required, you can get it. Now, when these prescriptions were made, you can understand it adds cost to the people who are processing the data. So the finance minister in the last budget, you must have heard, she came out with a proposal to promote data centers in the country itself.
Yes.
To promote building of data centers in the country. So I have written an article also, I think in Economic Times, supporting data localization, not as a mandatory measure, but as an incentive measure. Because I think if people are storing their data in clouds, in servers outside the country, because the cost of storage is low, because there is data protection, because there is authority. We as a country who are so strong in IT should be able to give that kind of service to the rest of the world, and we should become the data center ourselves. And so I am in disagreement with a lot of my fellow MPs, particularly from the Congress and others, who say that this is the ensuring that keeping the data only within the country is going to kill innovation, is going to kill, will add cost. I feel that this is an opportunity for us to actually become one of the kind of data, the hub of the world in data centers. People should be talking about having our servers and keeping their data here. So we should look at it that way. So that's my view, personal view. So these are the
question is, what about ethical hacking? Is the bill taking into considering it? Ethical hacking?
So ethical hacking, again, this is something which is on this debate is going on, but I would probably think that ethical hacking should be allowed only on anonymized data, that is non-personal data which cannot be linked to a person. Please remember, the thumb rule here is that if you are working on data which cannot be linked to an individual, there is no problem. But the argument against it is that technology is evolving so fast that a disaggregated data packet can again be recombined and taken to the individual from whom it has come back.
Yes.
So there is also an argument that standards of anonymization should also be prescribed. So it is becoming very complicated. But just like oil was there since the 70s as the main transaction in this world, data is going to be the new oil. And that is why you would see that if the Jio is working during the lockdown period to have our arrangement with Facebook, it is only for data. And that is why 40,000, 70,000 crores of transaction is taking place only to get data.
Illiterate people.
Sorry?
Illiteracy.
That's what I'm saying. We are doing such a great legislation affecting everybody, but that is my comment. I have written again against it, that you are having a central data protection authority, but what about the man in the village, Gram Panchayat, who is sharing data? The Panchayat authorities are sharing data, transacting with data, and taking person from an illiterate person. Who is safeguarding it? So can a centralized DPA be sufficient for a country of the size of India, or there should be decentralized authorities just like, let's say, consumer protection or the RTI? This is again, I have written against, submitted this kind of a view in newspaper.
Decentralized is advisable because we can't handle the illiterate people. By the time they press the keys, everything will be gone by hacking. Thank you.
Some other questions by anybody?
I had a couple of comments. There was this interesting book called Everybody Lies. And there they talk about the social media, for example, how Facebook is a happy place, everybody is sharing happy moments. Twitter is an angry place, everybody is trolling each other. And there are other sides where different kinds of emotions are expressed, and not the real emotions, probably the emotion which suits the particular media. And they talk about, there are some where we are actually reflecting our original thoughts. So, for example, if I am searching for a job in the Google, then actually Google knows that probably I am unemployed. I don't have a job, and therefore I'm looking for a job in the Google. And if I'm looking for something in, say, Amazon, probably Amazon knows that I'm looking for a particular type of product, and therefore they know about it. And in the process, they can use that data, they can make recommendations, and the whole purpose of all this is to make recommendations. Because if I don't make recommendations, show a blank page on Amazon, probably I will end up not searching anything and probably be lost in the whole process of millions of products which are available there. So collecting the data and using for this purpose actually makes our life very convenient and very easy. But at the same time, the data may be used for otherwise. So when we start restricting, are we also sacrificing our convenience, which will become going back to probably going to a regular store and saying, okay, give me this, rather than, walking in the store and doing an impulse purchase.
Very, very, very rightly, Professor Nayak said, this is the big question. This is the big question in the data protection bill. That how far can you go to protect individuals' privacy, and how far can you curtail, let us say, innovation or giving more choice to the citizens? Now here, as you said, a great example. I myself will not be able to crunch data the way the search engines can do, depending on what I have been looking for in the Google as to what kind of jobs I'm looking for. So you would see this if you open Flipkart and if you open Amazon and look for let us say toothpaste. After some time, you'll start getting advertisements of toothpaste. So this is the MCL they're doing. So there are some great advantages. There's no doubt about it. So the question there, the proponents against the PDP bills, they say that sometimes you learn a lot. This question has been said because of I was in that committee, child pornography, everyone should be banned and a lot of things could be done less than 18 years. But then the child also learns from Google by getting project reports, getting slides, getting these things, which is also there. So that balance has to be obtained at some point of time. But I think overall, if the consent, most of the time consent in India is not informed. You will find that, airline booking ticket, there's a huge amount of text on the screen. Do you agree? How many of us read it? We just agree, I agree, and then we go and book it. Actually, we might have compromised our privacy. When we don't do it, how will illiterate people do it? So the debate now is there that when Supreme Court says that you take the consent of the person, there are people who say that that consent has to be informed. But when this argument was made before the Supreme Court about informed consent with regard to Aadhaar, the Supreme Court didn't really accept it. It has rejected it. Currently, informed consent is not required. Consent is consent. But once you have informed consent, I think the kind of questions that the kind of choices that you would like to have by sharing your data would be probably more meaningful. But yes, there is some kind of a trade-off that you are doing by giving up certain things in order to protect your privacy. That's the big debate in this. That's really the big debate in this. I'll give another example since Professor Dr. Mahapatra is there. If you remember, at the initial stages of our COVID management, in the initial stages of positive cases coming up, there was one case which was detected in Suryanagar. And suo motu, the BMC divulged the name of the patient. But before that, they had not divulged the name of the patient. The decision has come from the High Court just 2 days ago that the triple test of this Puttaswamy judgment has to be observed even during the time of a pandemic. And that is the situation even in the United Kingdom. That medical emergencies such as these do not still give you the right to take away citizens' data without taking his consent. I had argued in a newspaper in some of the articles that when there is a choice between, or when there is a trade-off between right to life and right to privacy, the right to life of many people, that is, should trump over the others. But I think the courts are taking the view now that whatever be the situation, unless there is, as I said, that it has to be reasonable, it has to be proportionate. If there is, let us say, a crisis like let's say funny cyclone and everything is devastated, obviously you can't ask the citizen. If there is a war, China has attacked, you can't ask the citizen. But in this medical kind of emergency, I still feel in one of these case, when the data was divulged because they were not able to contact trace. So unless you divulge, people will not come. So I think that choice has to be taken by the person who is keeping that data. But just see the difference now. Previously in government, you design any form, you ask everything that you want, whatever comes to your mind, collect that data, even though it is of no use. Now it puts an embargo. There has to be a purpose limitation. And if you're getting the data, you have to tell the patient that I'm getting that data. And you see in medical sciences, so much of data is there. If you use AI and all, it can actually give a boost to cancer research and lots of things in agriculture everywhere. So we can't stop that. That has to happen. And the law and the PDP bill does recognize that. So the question now is how far to go, how far not to go. So those questions will always be there.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
See, there's a COVID test. The ICMR designed a form in which you should give Aadhaar number. I asked that why Aadhaar is required for this personal identity. You can ask a maybe simple your identity card, your maybe a ration card, your voter ID card, even a I card which is given by the hospital.
Absolutely.
But nobody. Then I asked ICMR why Aadhaar number has to be entered for doing COVID test. Another example, we are taking a project from DST. When you are a principal investigator and co-investigator, so one of the professor and tell me, sir, tell your Aadhaar number. I said, for what? He said, money will come from the DST. So how? Why not? Why? You just want a Aadhaar number very clearly told by the Aadhaar committee by Supreme Court. It's only some purpose. Despite of that, government agencies. See the simple form. I want my COVID test because I am suffering from cough. Because my name and age and sex may be necessary. Aadhaar is not necessary. PAN is not necessary.
Absolutely.
So when somebody asks me, I say I won't give anything. You want to do my COVID test too, or give me writing so that I ask in RTI, why do you need Aadhaar?
Not audible, Dr. Mahapatra, not audible, not
Can you
audible.
not hear?
Yes,
I
yes.
thought you are hearing.
Yes,
I
yes,
thought you
I'm
are
hearing. I'm hearing. Yes.
I was telling many government forms till now is
Yes.
written you need Aadhaar for asking for a project from DST and ICMR. The ICMR form has come for COVID test RT-PCR, which says give your Aadhaar number. I say it doesn't mean Aadhaar, some identity. It could be driving license. It could be voter ID card. It could be ration card. Why Aadhaar? Specifically Aadhaar. So I didn't give Aadhaar. I got a COVID test without Aadhaar. So I don't think people even question, because thousands of COVID tests is done. The simple say give your Aadhaar number. I have not been able to understand
That is precisely that
because
is precisely
our
the point.
citizens do not ask very simple question. The question is that it's not only awareness, it is how to have relevant question so that the person who has designed the form, they should modify it according to the law, because Aadhaar law is different, your right to information law is different, and now right to the safety is different. So when you go to a complex process, the citizen must know what is necessary from me for what purpose and what is not. And the forms are made by the people sitting on a clerical office. They don't understand. I'm sure ICMR doesn't require Aadhaar card. ICMR doesn't require Aadhaar card for COVID test. So we never question. Because if 10% person question, then the form will be changed. But because nobody question and then comes and give your Aadhaar and go, doesn't. I asked my driver, why did you give your Aadhaar number? Sir, doctor ne manga. Yeah, doctor has the right to ask for anything. So I am telling you, see the Aadhaar card for simple thing. Not necessary.
No,
So
very correct. You are very correct. You see, Supreme Court struck down. If you remember, the government at that time said that the Aadhaar has to be linked to for telephone connection for everything. Supreme Court struck it down.
Absolutely.
Aadhaar is to be used only for disbursement of government benefits,
Absolutely.
for social benefits. Population register is for getting identification data. So now this purpose limitation, which has been set out by the Supreme Court and which is codified, now is going to take place. Now in this, you are very right. The form is not. There's no need, because even if you had no Aadhaar, even if you had no unique identification authority or a ration card, would you allow a positive patient to roam around? No.
No.
You will definitely test him. So there is no actually need of it. And what this act now does is that if you are collecting it, the person collecting it is also equally responsible now, which was not there earlier. So if you are, so the purpose limitation is someone can really haul him to the court, and if he has by chance leaked that data somewhere, then he had it, because now the penalties are huge. So for the first time, I find that in a government bill proposed by the government itself, it has given a huge penalty to government servants who are keeping data and would finally be responsible for breach of data. It is a positive thing.
Thank you.
But I fully agree with you, sir.
I have
we are in the habit of collecting data for doing nothing.
I have last question to you, Dr. Patnaik. We know you are a government officer as well as presently parliamentarian. In most of the government offices, people are having WhatsApp group. And through that group, they are exchanging files, informations, orders. Should it be? And is the data protection bill looking into it?
No, so if the WhatsApp group transfers files within themselves, it is not going, if it is not going out of India, that is, there is no cross-border data flow.
It will go.
Then if it goes, then they are covered under the data protection bill.
Yes,
In fact,
yes.
here there is an interesting thing I must say. The WhatsApp platform has end-to-end encryption. Now, since it has end-to-end encryption, you do not know, they are not willing to break that encryption at any cost. They have not even allowed it to be broken in the United States. But in our country, that in case There is a fake news because of which there is a communal riot. There is a death in the community of 500 people because of a false news spread by somebody. Will we not at least be, and we fix the person, we want to know by investigation who is the person who has spread that information. So for those particular messages, at least allow an end-to-end encryption to be broken.
Yes.
Till now, they have not agreed. They're not agreeing world over. But after this law comes into being, I have a gut feeling that they will have to have technology.
Yes.
In fact, the technology is going to develop on both sides. Technology will come to break the protection given to citizens, and the technology will also come to enhance the protection given to citizens.
Yes. Security, cyber security, data security will
Yes.
matter. Otherwise, it will be broken, and all the informations are in the foreign cloud. That WhatsApp, Facebook, Google. That's the arrow. That is how. Thank you. I'm over, sir.
I think, sir, should you ask for any further questions, or we will stop it here, sir?
I think finished.
Hello?
I think it is finished.
Hello?
Yeah, I think 6:15, 1 hour, 15 minutes, it's over. So please ask Vivek Patnaik. He is there. You may request him.
Yes, yes. Let him speak something. Sir. If he's not there.
He's there.
So he's there.
He's there. He can conclude the thing. You can request him to conclude.
Yes, sir is there. I can see him unmute. He unmuted his mic.
Thank you very much, General Mahapatra. It was a great pleasure hearing Amar Patnaik. It was an excellent elucidation on the subject, extremely educative and I think timely. In the sense, I appreciated very much his statement, while this matter is so important to everybody, but the subject has been discussed only by very few people, some 20 members of the committee, a maximum of 1,000 members in the parliament. Well, I think tank like that we have should actually discuss this subject at great length. And in fact, we should communicate our views to the member of the parliament. Amar Patnaik is member of the Rajya Sabha from Odisha. So he represents all of us from Odisha. If we have got views, some suggestions, ideas for bringing modifications to the law or improvement to the law at the drafting stage, I think we should take his help. I'm sure Amar Patnaik will agree. I'm sorry, Amar, I'm calling you Amar because you are...
Yes, sir, please. I am Amar to all of you.
But you are a member of the parliament. I have seen you as a very young officer.
Sir.
So I should call you Honorable Member of Parliament.
Sir, I'm, in fact, my apologies, sir. I saw your mobile. I tried to get back to you. You had tried to contact me a couple of times. My deepest apologies. But it will be a great idea, sir, as you said, to get your views, and I try to take it on the agenda of the committee.
You see, you are very right. It's not only a fundamental right as interpreted by Supreme Court. Actually, it's a human right. If you see the Universal Declaration of Human Rights.
Human rights, yes.
And the Covenant of Political and Social Rights of 1960, to which India is a signatory. Right. India signed the convention. It's a human right. And in fact, the Human Rights Act of India should cover it. It has not been exclusively covered. By way of implication, the Supreme Court should cover it. While on the subject, I would like to suggest to Mr. Amar Patnaik that whether the Data Protection Authority can serve as a privacy commission, which many countries have, many advanced countries have privacy commission to protect right to privacy. Right to privacy, as I mentioned, is a human right. And I think while discussing the subject, Mr. Amar Patnaik can raise it with the parliamentarians, so there should be a privacy commission in India. It was an excellent presentation, and I think very good questions, and we are greatly benefited by the observation Dr. Ashok Mahapatra made. and also by Sanghamitra Mohanty. As usual, General Mahapatra, even having crossed the age of 80, he continues to be almost between 40 and 45 in his age, in his sharpness of mind. It was a very good discussion. Thank you all. I thank particularly Amar Patnaik for everything. And I thank Ashok Mahapatra as also Sanghamitra. Okay?
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you, sir. Namaskar.
Thank you, Ashok.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Amarji. I'll just talk to you. Okay?
Yes, ma'am, sure.
Because
Thank
I have
you.
many techniques to discuss, and if you like this.
Sure. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much. It's a
Patnaik.
pleasure, actually, because I think the
Swadesh.
last I spoke in the think tank was in a physical form.
Sir,
Swadesh,
you may have the last
please take
word,
on.
sir. Please
No.
thank
No,
everyone.
he has done concluding. Please go ahead. Thank you. You do that.
So let me have the formal duty of proposing a vote of thanks. And my big thanks to Honorable MP Amar Patnaik, Dr. Amar Patnaik, Amar, and you have reached us in spite of your pressing engagements. Thank you very much. And I must thank Vivek Patnaik, D.K. Rai, Dr. Tamotia, Major General Mahapatra for guiding this, the whole thing. They are actually the prime drivers of this project. And then I must thank Sanghamitra Mohanty, and then Ashok Mahapatra and others, those who have joined here and are participated. And G.K. Naik, of course he's there, and they are very good in IT and other matters, and they have participated very well, and they enriched the discourse here. And then I must thank everybody, those who have joined here, and most important, the springboard of this program is Professor Mangaraj, Professor Abhishek Sinha, and Swarup. They have made a team. They provided the technological support to it, and they coordinated technically exceedingly well. Thank you very much. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. And my last regards to Mr. D.K. Rai. Actually, he couldn't see me probably, and I couldn't also hear him. But my regards to him too. Thank you.
You may declare close. So then
Yes,
you may declare the meeting as closed.
yours is the last word, sir. The meeting is.
I say you may declare it as closed.
Yes, sir, it is closed.
Okay,
So
thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Command.